I think it's important to understand what we are downstream from. Who was here in 2001, 2002? Okay, well, you will remember then the backdrop on this slide. And the backdrop on this whole picture is we are downstream of this problem right here. We are a heavy sales tax and personal income tax state generator. And on July 1 of 2008, the governor certified a budget of $21 billion for the state of North Carolina. That is the big slice of pie that all of us agencies and campuses have available to us to deal with. Almost immediately, that money started to not show up in the monthly receipts that were projected, and you can see this at the 4% level decline in July of what was projected to come in off the $21 billion, and it's not ratable by the 12 months, but nonetheless, it failed to show up at the projected level in July and continued a downward slide since then, and has gotten progressively worse even as we have entered 2009. Now, the back part of that is 2001, 2002. We are meaningfully worse off on a collection basis, revenues coming into the state, than we were in 2001, 2002. And this slide is meant to demonstrate that, but also demonstrate the volatility which is really shows up last week, April 15th, which we don't know those numbers for yet. In fact, we will probably get them next week. But if this relationship continues, we know that in 01-02, in this volatile personal income tax period of last week, it got substantially worse in 01-02, and it's likely to occur, and that was down 10% at that level. At this sort of ratio, those numbers could be 12%. Now, so on $21 billion, that means something probably less than $19 billion shows up to fund what was appropriated out at $21 billion. So that's just a little bit of the backdrop of what the state is facing, I think, to appreciate our financial and cash problems that Phil alluded to. It's important to understand what is upstream from us and the problems that the state is facing, and this is meant to sort of illustrate that.
I want to put in context for you what David just said. And David talked about the fact that the state revenues have, from the beginning of the fiscal year, which was last July 1st, come in more slowly than projected when the state set the budget. That affects one part of the revenues for UNC Charlotte, but I want to give you the big picture of revenues for UNC Charlotte and then come back to the fact that a portion of those have been cut during the course of the year and have been cut severely since April 9th in what we refer to as either the budget freeze or the train wreck. I need to go back, please. Okay, let me talk about university revenues. This is from 2008 fiscal year. That's because 2009 fiscal year does not end until June 30th of this year. So this is the most recent year. And you'll notice that the total revenues for UNC Charlotte were $425 million. The single largest component of that revenue were appropriations. Those appropriations come from the state government, and those are the ones that are being adversely affected by the fact that the revenues to the state are much lower than forecast when they set the budget. So David's picture with the red and the brown feed into our green slice of the pie. Again, the biggest slice of the pie, which are appropriations. The second largest set of revenues are tuition and fees. And tuition and fees, of course, are paid by students here who come to UNC Charlotte to enroll. These two things together are considered general funds. And this will come up later as we talk through our conversation. But these two are considered general funds. Other revenues include auxiliary services, sales and services at $41 million. Those include things like housing, bookstore, food service, vending. So auxiliary revenues, those are not affected by the state's situation. We still have students living on campus. We still have students buying books at the bookstore. We still have people buying Diet Coke from the vending machine, which I'm now doing even more frequently than usual. So that set of revenues is really largely unchanged. And as we continue to have people here as students and employees and continue to support those businesses, those revenues continue to be strong. Grants. Grants come in two major forms, if you will. One are grants and contracts that the research faculty in particular and those who support the research enterprise are familiar with. And those may come from the federal government, state government, from industry as well. But in addition to that, we also have a set of funds that comes to support student financial aid, and that's considered a grant revenue. So that's actually a picture that might improve over time. But it is a small part of the pie, as you can see, relatively small part of the pie. But it is a picture that may improve over time, largely because of the federal stimulus bill. Then we have additions to endowments and gifts. Those are things that people donate to us. So big donors give us tens or hundreds or even millions of dollars, and that shows up in there. Investment income comes from, largely from, the interest that's earned on cash balances that we hold with the state, and I'll come back to that. Capital dollars, very important to understand. Capital dollars and operating dollars are different colors of money. So you'll see that appropriations are green and tuition and fees are orange, and capital at $36 million are gray. The set of rules, in fact, for all of these types of funds, there are different sets of rules for what they can be used for and who can direct that use. And that dollars don't move from pot to pot. So, for example, we have capital dollars to build the bioinformatics building, and those dollars are not at risk. And so while we have had to give back 7% or so of our operating dollars this year, our capital dollars for bioinformatics have remained with us and not at risk. They're funded from different streams. They're not funded from personal income tax. They're not funded from state income tax, not directly. So they come from a different stream of dollars at the state level, and they're committed over different periods of time. So the capital dollars are still there, and they're still there on this campus, and so they're still building the bioinformatics building. The capital dollars are still available for us to break ground on and build the Center City building. But it is important to note that that's a different color of money, a different pot of money. And so when you see us building buildings while we're having to cut back on operating expenses, it's because the rules and type of money that fund capital projects are coming from a different pot at the state. And then we've got a very small amount of other income. But again, the important thing to note here is what is being frozen are our operating revenues. At this point, frozen, and during the course of this year, reverted. During the course of this year, you would have heard that we are reverting anywhere from 10 to more than 10%, depending on the, 7, to more than 10%, depending on the division you're in. And that has occurred because of the picture that David showed you. The fact that tax receipts out of the gate last July were lower than they had projected. So over the course of this year, we have been giving back, if you will, money to the state in the form of the 7% reversion. And then on April 9th, the Office of State Budget and Management realized that the state does not have sufficient cash to make it to June 30th and to fulfill the statutory obligation to have a balanced budget on June 30th. And so they put stringent cash flow restrictions on us. So if you have specific questions, we ask that you send those through, that are applicable to your unit specifically. We ask that you channel those through your budget office or budget manager in the colleges in particular.